So I just listened to the podcast. It was a TED Talk by Joan, Halifax, on the topic of compassion. She's apparently a Zen master. I guess that means she was some sort of Buddhist black belt person. I don't really know. I don't know enough about that religion or about Zen and stuff like that. And it's really good because it's coming from a guy who lacks. I was always made fun of in college for having no compassion, which seems really unfair because I don't think of myself as lacking complete empathy for people. I feel like I am empathetic. I'm very much empathetic for people. I'm just hard or cold, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, I mean, I will say this. So she talked about, this will give you an example of how cold I am or hard I am. So she told the story about how some great Buddhist philosopher spent years in meditation and decided when he was ready to go out into the world to share what he's learned and to really go forth and make a difference in the world. First thing he did is he came upon a dog that was injured, that had a wound on its leg and that had maggots all over the wound. And to not injure the maggots, because the Buddhists believe that all life is sacred, the guy got down and licked the maggots off the dog's wound in order to not hurt the maggots and to also clean the wound of the dog. And then the dog magically turned into the spirit of love or something like that, and that was talking about how compassionate they were. And of course, the only thought that ran through my head was, why are you licking off the maggots? The maggots are actually serving a good purpose. They're actually removing the infection, the infected skin off the dog, and that's just gross. So, I don't know, it's a bad illustration for showing compassion. But on that topic, showing compassion for other people in the world, I think it's interesting. We live in such a society where, morals are relative, and so compassion seems to be one of those things where it could be viewed, I guess has lots of different views on what compassion is and what is truly compassionate. Because I think a lot of, intellectuals or elites or people like me, maybe, I don't think so much like this, but I hear this comment a lot, where okay, so we have a world population that's growing at an exponential rate, and so you have all these people in these third world countries who are having lots and lots and lots of kids, like 8 to 10 more kids, and they're starving to death. I mean, if you've seen the pictures, the situation in Sudan, it's absolutely heart-wrenching. It's absolutely horrible to see these children. And we always think of children. It's so horrible when children suffer, much worse than adults, because I guess we view them as being innocent. But anyway, so it tugs at our heart worse. And we don't like the fact that these children are starving. But at the same time, if all we're doing is just feeding them, is that not making the situation just worse? Where we're keeping them alive, yet only to continue the vicious cycle of death and suffering. I guess that would be the hard side of it. Is kind of like, is that truly compassionate to allow these children to be born into suffering? And I think that's where a lot of people come into the idea that that's the reason why abortion should be okay. Because if a mother doesn't want the child, how horrible is that for a child to be born into an environment where they're not loved, or that they'll be neglected or severely abused? Would it be better then for that child not to survive? And I think that probably tugs at a lot of people's hearts. That they would actually view that as an act of compassion. Whereas on the flip side, pro-life people who would also say they're compassionate would say, that's horrible. What kind of a monster would abort a baby? It's taking a person's life. But both sides are viewing themselves as being very compassionate. And their means of achieving that, or exercising that compassion, is brought about in very different ways. So, I thought the talk was interesting. I don't think it answered anything, just because we don't really address, well, what does it really mean to be compassionate, and how do you best exercise compassion? And I think that's where the other key ingredient, which you have to have, is wisdom, which is not just intellectual knowledge, but goes beyond just a logical formulation, but I mean, it's not just set in cold hard facts. It's something that comes about also from, ultimately, I'm a Christian, so I'd say ultimately wisdom comes from God. And because we can say, if you've met people, you're like, that person's really wise, and they can be of completely, different view from you, but you'd say that person's wise, even if they're not intellectually, like, they don't believe necessarily the same thing you do. So, I don't know. That's all I got for that.